Councillor Duncan Wood is substituting Councillor Toms, Councillor Chopak, Councillor Crode, Councillor Lever and Councillor Ewings. Thank you, Chair. You don't need the rest of that. Just carry on.
And just before we start the meeting, I want to welcome the students from the university. Welcome. I don't know if it's any warmer up there. It's not very warm down here. No, keep your coats on. Okay, members, do we have any declarations of interest for this part 1 meeting? Okay, so we're going to move on straight to item 3, and so I'm going to pass over to Councillor Loudon, please.
Thank you, Chair. As you're aware, in light of the Commissioner's letter of apology of the 20th of November, I've submitted a supplementary motion, which would mean that I would not move the motion that's on the agenda. Rather, I don't know whether you want it read out. I'm happy to read it out, which says, following the Commissioner's letter to the panel dated 20th November 2024, in which she offers the panel an apology, the panel resolves to do 2 things. 1, note and accept the Commissioner's apology. 2, request the Chair and Vice Chair, in consultation with the host authority and the OPCC, ensures an agreed, clear process for future appointments is agreed at the next meeting of the panel. And if I may, Chair, in support of that, can I just turn to the Commissioner's letter of apology? So I just wish to pick up a few points that are in there. So in the second paragraph, I take my hat off to the person who's sought to try and craft this letter. The second paragraph talks about the Commissioner's disappointment that hadn't been raised with her by individuals. This is about the panel, it's not about individual members, and therefore this motion seeks to, had sought to look at how the panel collectively had been dealt with. The third paragraph talks about what appears to be a misunderstanding, and I'm sorry if the Commissioner has had a misunderstanding. I certainly haven't, and I don't believe the panel would. In the 5th paragraph, the Commissioner said that she didn't need to await the panel's written confirmation because she was here listening to what we said. I think it's probably good practice for anybody to await the formal record, because as we all know, what is said in the chamber and what ends up in a formal letter can sometimes change. However, I would say that that comment is contrary to the expectations the Commissioner set out in her letter of the 1st of July, where she promoted the applicant to us. And it is also at odds, I would suggest, with the date of decision signed on the 26th of July by the Commissioner and the Chief Executive, in which it says, quote unquote, the PCC has carefully considered the recommendation of the panel and has decided to appoint Mr. Kingscote. I'm just slightly intrigued as to when that careful consideration took place, given that the Commissioner left here and then went and spoke immediately to the BBC. It didn't give much time for that. I'm looking at you.
I'm a little bit concerned, Councillor Loudon, that we could be discussing the motion that we're not going to be listening to today. So,
sorry, I was, Chair, forgive me, I was just trying to put the letter into some context. And if I just may say one more thing then, it's just that over the page, it talks there about the legislation not specifying how and when a response should be given, but it's very clear a response has to be given, very clear a response has to be given, and I just say 17 working days is not acceptable.
Can I thank you, Councillor Loudon. Before I bring in Councillor Hackett, from a chair point of view, can I thank you for your letter as well, Commissioner, as well. Councillor Hackett.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to say a few words before I second the motion
I am grateful for the letter of apology, and I would like to quote the words said in an email to Alison from Michael Joyce, who, like myself, is a past recipient of the Police Commissioner Award. And he said, "I have been a supporter, Alison, along the way, but I left the meeting very concerned, as in my opinion, there were a
Councillor
great number of
Hackett.
comments made which
Councillor
I felt
Hackett.
did not do you any credit."
Councillor Hackett, are you formally seconding the decision? Because what I don't want to do is I do not want to start opening any other debate. It's
No,
been brought
this,
for
I've got one
us.
sentence and then I'll finish. And it concludes, "I am wondering perhaps if it is an appropriate moment for you to reflect and reconsider your
No.
approach and working
Councillor
relationship with the
Hackett,
panel."
Councillor Hackett.
That's all I have to say.
Councillor Hackett.
Thank you.
Do I have a formal seconder?
You do.
If not,
I
will
second.
do it. Okay. So I will close this item. Thank you very much for coming early. It is. Oh, we move to the vote. Sorry, I'm just surmising there. I do apologise. It's because I haven't got the correct papers in front of me. Can I ask members to raise their hands? Firstly, in favour, please.
Unanimous, thank you, Chair.
Unanimous. Do we have any it's unanimous? Okay, all right. Okay, I'm just quite happy to close the meeting. Sorry, that was a little bit chaos. So our next meeting starts at 11, is that correct, Ross?
Through you, Chair, the next meeting starts at 11:30, and due to the Local Government Act, we're not allowed to start it any earlier, so we must wait until 11:30, so we'll start then. Thank you.
Mr. Jago, you said it was unanimous. It wasn't unanimous. I abstained. But
Oh,
Yeah.
my apologies,
No problem.
Councillor. I thought I saw your hand go up.
no, my arms were crossed.
Hence why I
An
did
abstention.
try to move different things, so I do apologise, Councillor Thomas.
Apologies, Councillor. We'll have that
That's
noted.
absolutely fine.
Please go and have a hot drink and warm up, and I will see everybody at 11 o'clock. $11:30. I'm trying to bring the meeting earlier. Okay, panel members, is everybody ready to start? So, just before we start the meeting, we've got 2 new members. If you would like to introduce yourself, Caroline?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Caroline Jones, and I'm the independent member for Cornwall. So it's nice to meet you all.
Hello, my name is Gordon Czapieski, and if you struggle with the surname, pretend the Z's an H, and that makes it a bit easier. Gordon Czapieski, I'm District Councillor with Devon District Council. I'm Vice Chair of Council, I'm Vice Chair of Audit, I'm on Scrutiny and Planning and other committees. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for trying to explain it. I do have an awful problem with surnames, so do bear with me. And it does sound like you have a very big portfolio going on there. So we have apologies. Ross?
Yes, Chair, thank you. I'll just have to find my notes. I do apologise. No, you haven't stolen it from me. We've apologies from Councillor Penberthy. Councillor Rainsford is substituting. Councillor Wright. Councillor Duncan Wood is substituting. We've also received apologies from Councillor Toms, Councillor Chopak, Councillor Lever, Councillor Ewings, and Councillor Crode, who's had a family bereavement, so our sympathies with Councillor Crode.
And can I welcome the substitutes and thank you for attending. So if we can go on to item 2, and that's the minutes that are in your pack. I'm quite happy to go through page by page. So page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Through you,
9.
Chair. Sorry, I'll interrupt you there. We did have a note from Barry Jones, just reference a change in item 12 concerning how many organisations he had served as a pension trustee for. So we've made the change, Barry. So just so you're aware.
Thank you, Ross. Do I have a show of... Oh, sorry, Councillor Hack.
Thank you, Chair. At the last meeting, I asked for an amendment to be made about the comments pertaining to, shall we say, the inappropriate tweet made by the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner. Did you write that into the minutes?
I shall pass over to our Democratic Service.
So we reviewed the webcast, and what was included in the minutes was what was said.
Right, so you've included it into the minutes. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any queries with the minutes in today's pack? No? Can I have a show of hands, please, that everyone's in agreement with the minutes? Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to item 3, declarations of interest. Any members got any declarations of interest? Nope, lovely. Item 4, public questions. I've not received any public questions. Nope, brilliant. Item 5 is the draft police and crime panel, which is on page 13. Okay. So I haven't got any chair's notes, so I'm surmising that we're going to hand over to the Commissioner. Yeah, I have a good memory then. So, Commissioner, would you like to talk about your report, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Do excuse me if you see me shivering. I am not frightened sat here. I am absolutely frozen. So I've just borrowed a scarf and a coat from a colleague in order to try and keep myself warm during this meeting. So I do feel for members who are also maybe struggling with the coldness of the room. But thank you. As many of you will know who've been here for a while and those who are new, after an election of a police and crime commissioner, you have 12 months to produce your police and crime plan, And the Police and Crime Plan is a statutory document of which the Chief Constable has to have regard to. And within that plan, that's where you set what you believe to be the priorities that should be for policing. And I can promise you they've already got a plethora of priorities, whether that's from the government, let alone whether that's from myself. So I thought I would just talk you through. I've got a presentation for you which may make it a little bit easier than just looking through the document. This is still a draft, by the way. I know it doesn't say that on the title, but because I await your views and recommendations after this meeting in terms of the Police and Crime Plan. It sets out a period of 5 years, even though my term of office is only 4, and this enables the next election of a Police and Crime Commissioner to have their 12-month period in which they may wish to produce their plan. Some may produce them more quickly, some may take a full 12 months. So it just depends upon who's elected. Just to give you a bit about what we've looked at in terms of the plan, we've had to make sure that we've looked at all the evidence that we have amongst us. Some of us will be aware of the Peninsula Strategic Assessment that is produced. So we have regards to that, which is your community safety partnerships use as a base for their priority setting. I also have to look at the strategic policing requirement and the government priorities that are set out for people. I've also had consideration, in particular, I would say the big focus that we've noticed is around Her Majesty's Inspectorate for Fire and Rescue Services in terms of what the challenges are for the force's performance. So you'll see quite a difference in this plan to my previous plan about what the focus is. And we've done lots of surveys over the years, and we've done lots of identification of any major risks that the force are facing at the moment, or our communities, in order to incorporate some of the rationale as to why we've chosen some of the things that we have. You'll see when we do the Your Safety, Your Say survey, we usually do one annual survey around the budget process setting time, because we have to consult on the totality of the budget. So some of that has fed into that, but we've also done a separate ongoing survey that we now have available that people can do at any time throughout the year, so that we're capturing people's concerns and issues. And I think the bit that's highlighted on the screen that you can see is this is just one survey that was done specifically around the Police and Crime Plan. But as I said, we've incorporated many others. There'll be no particular surprises for you there, other than perhaps the carrying of weapons being quite high on that one, and also child abuse, which again doesn't usually feature in the top 5 priorities of the community. We've also tried to work out what people think about their policing services and how supportive or how, in terms of the plan itself, they think it actually will make a difference to their communities. So I think just in terms of, we've actually consulted on the draft plan itself, which, as you know, any member here who represents a local authority will know when you do things like your draft transport survey or your big plans, you get smaller responses, but often a lot of good quality responses, because it's keen people of interest and stakeholders that will willingly respond to those. So people have told us that they support some of the priorities that we've identified. And you'll see these are the 4 that I'm looking to set this year. There isn't a limit on the numbers, so you could have 1, you could have 10. And you'll see what's been changed in particular that I thought you might be interested in is I am taking road safety out as a priority, because we've got such an established business as usual structure on the focus of road safety that I don't need to make the Chief Constable do something as a major step change now. We've done that in the last term of office. So I am actually replacing road safety with theft. And I'm sure many of your towns, cities and communities are quite perturbed by the level of theft that's happening in our high streets, but also around domestic burglary. We may be the lowest domestic burglary area in the country, but policing nationally promises to visit every burglary victim, and that still doesn't quite happen in Devon and Cornwall. So I am making sure that we are going to be following some of those policies. The other addition that I'm putting in is around the drivers of crime. So you know we focused on drugs for the last term of office. I'm actually adding alcohol into that as well as one of the key drivers for crime. And we particularly, there are two areas there that interest me, is around the nighttime economy and public order challenges that we face, and the driver for domestic violence and sexual violence around some of the uses of alcohol as well. So just so that you're aware, that's the key step change in the plan from the previous one. And because I wanted to make it clear, so it wasn't too nebulous, I wanted to be really clear how we're going to deliver that geographically. So we've really thought about what does this mean for our towns and cities that maybe have different scale of challenges to our rural communities? What does it mean to our rural communities? And particularly interested, as you know, with road safety, how are we going to tackle it on our roads to keep the criminals and deny them the use of our roads around those priorities? And also, you know, in people's homes and neighbourhoods, what does it mean for them there? So it's to give a bit more clarity and a bit more focus than just 4 priorities. I just wanted to go through some of the areas. You've got it in your document there, but it's laid out differently. So there's 2 ways you can lay it out. You can lay it about how you're going to do it geographically and put your 4 priorities underneath. Or you can lay out your 4 priorities and how you're going to do it geographically. So this is the alternative way to view the plan. So you can view it in 2 different ones. So antisocial behaviour, still a challenge for us across Devon and Cornwall. And I'm particularly and acutely aware that it is huge level of partnership working that happens in this space. This is not a police-led alone initiative. The local authorities, and I want to thank the local authorities, have worked so much in this space on antisocial behaviour. And I want to just make it clear that we really still want to tackle that. So you can see those are the sort of 4 areas that we're looking at around it. In particular, I'm also particularly concerned about wildlife crime and antisocial behaviour in our rural communities, because it is often seen less severe than it is in our towns and cities. So we need to come up with some good solutions for our rural communities. And you will be aware that tackling some of our challenges around youth and boredom and the routes that they may end up leading themselves into crime can often start with antisocial behaviour. But I'm particularly concerned, if members will recall, every performance measure, when I brought the performance report to you in the past, shows we've got an increase of young people who are victims of crime, and I'm really concerned about that. So really do want to still be focused on antisocial behaviour. Drugs and alcohol, we've spent quite a lot of time focused on tackling drug dealers in the last term of office, and we've done presentations to you before around Operation Scorpion. I'm particularly keen to see what more we can do, and I've made a big focus on our roads around drink and drug driving. And again, this is sometimes more of a challenge in our rural communities where there may be less roads policing and less ability to be caught. We want to make sure that people are behind the wheel at their best wherever they live. So we do really want to focus on how we're going to tackle drugs and alcohol in our community. I'm particularly keen, and as you know, I've been working and focused on Torbay recently, but our coastal towns and the drug challenges that they face have been, I would say, not neglected, but become more visible in our communities. And everywhere you go, you can see people who are struggling with addictions, and we need to work out a way to do it. My vision, that where I'd like to get to on this agenda, is exactly the same where we've got to on road safety. I want to get to an establishment of an economic model around it, where we get the income from the drug dealers that we're taking from them, and we create some funding to be able to help more with treatment. So that's where I'd like to go on the drug space, drug and alcohol space, just like we've done on road safety. We've now got a sustainable model in road safety, investing in safety in our roads, and I want to get to the same sort of place with drugs and alcohol. Serious violence. I know local authorities, you now have a duty to tackle serious violence, and again, I want to thank you for your efforts and what you've done so far to try and make a real difference. As you know, violent crime is increasing. It's been increasing over the years at a rate higher than any of our other crimes in this community. So we're often the lowest for shoplifting, the lowest for burglary, but we're the lowest for acquisitive crime, always on the very low end. But our violence crime just seems to keep increasing, and we've got a challenge around that. And I think in terms of the biggest thing that I want to achieve, and I know the new government is really keen to halve the level of violence against women and girls. I'm awaiting the detail of what that looks like, but my view and why I've put it in the plan is that we are going to have to come up with some radical ideas to intervene in that space, and we can't just keep doing what we're doing and continue to keep doing what we're doing. We need to do radical ideas. So again, local authorities, and I'm sure all your partners will be able to supply some of those. I have some already in my mind, but we need to really think about how do we get into that space in a different way than we have before. Just in terms of the theft, that I'll highlight in terms of that one, for me in particular, and I'm most worried about, is I'm the national lead for serious and organised crime for Police and Crime Commissioners. I co-chair that with David Allen, who is the Police and Crime Commissioner for Cumbria. And one of the challenges we face is a lack of intelligence and a lack of structure around tackling serious and organised crime, particularly in our rural areas. So as many of you will know who represent rural communities, people who have large machinery theft or livestock theft, they're often out of the country before we've even caught them. And so we've got to get a lot better about how we deal with that. And it's about also building confidence in rural communities to make sure that they are reporting things that they see. So we've got something there that I think is a bit of a step change on what we've done before. And as you'll probably be delighted to know, you'd want to see our shoplifters dealt with more swiftly and more ably. We are really struggling. Now, you know, one of the challenges we've got is people who are shoplifting multiple times, and often it's only those who assault a worker that will often actually get arrested and dealt with. But those who are regularly shoplifting are, if you like, almost getting away with it. So that, again, there needs to be a step change in how we're tackling theft in our towns and cities. And this is the bit that's slightly different from previous ones, is I've really focused on what we need to do to support the police force in terms of how they can improve their performance. So I will have some metrics. You probably can't see that on the screen, but it is in your pack. I will have some metrics that will enable us to properly performance manage what's there, and I will be bringing some of those reports to you for you to help scrutinise and support me in that challenge. And I'm really clear at the moment that we want to make sure, and in fact you'll be quite surprised at the feedback on the draft plan, is that some of the stakeholders thought it was too crime focused. Now, all I can say is, because I want to ensure that our police force is relentlessly pursuing criminals and that is their focus, that is why the Police and Crime Plan is very much focused about tackling crime and very much focused on making sure that we can have a police service that delivers the expectation of the public around those areas. And that's a little overview for you. So this is before you to comment, and again, obviously, I'll look forward to your recommendations, which I can consider before I finalise the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just before I open it up for questions, just want to just say on page 15, your draft plan has two overarching themes: improving your policing and crime service, and working together to reduce crime and antisocial behaviour. I really welcome this. This is part of Plymouth's corporate plan, so I welcome that one. So I was just going to quickly get in first. So Councillor Loudon, please.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, I think you've got the, whatever you call it, that changes it. Can you go back to your first slide, if you would, which in which you explained the data, if you will, that you've relied upon for this. No, that's okay. That's okay. I understand the issues with Wi-Fi. Don't worry. I can ask the question anyway. So I'm looking at the data collection that you've gone through. There you go. In essence, it's the big middle blue box there. So the data collection and the resourcing, I'm looking at the two things. So if you take my district, East Devon, and if you take the west end of our district, which is around, towards Exeter and around the airport end of, and you know it, we've got a new town, Cranbrook. You were there with the Assistant Chief Constable earlier in the year. So there are around 9,000 residents, and it's growing. And they're much younger than the rest of our district, and therefore they've got predominantly they've got families, young people who grow up, become teenagers, become young adults, and they themselves bring different issues that we have to police, and I don't say it in a negative way. Our local plan for our housing stock for the next period is just going through its finalisation. The expectation is we will have a new town in that area, which will bring will double the numbers that are in that area through Cranbrook. So I suppose my question then is, when you're looking at this, I don't see that you've taken, or there's data there that relates to future developments that we collectively are putting forward. And we all have to deliver an awful lot of housing, and therefore there will be additional needs and resources for the future. So how will you adjust and take account of those sorts of future developments?
Thank you, Chair. No, that's absolutely fine. Separately to this, as you know, I'm responsible for the police estate and all the land that is also around, that is owned by my office rather than the Chief Constable. We do an estate strategy, and it might be something that the panel might be interested in having a presentation on at some point, and it links to the budget setting process. So this does not incorporate every single thing that the police are doing or every single thing that my office is doing. This is really just to set what the priorities are that we're going to put extra focus on at this point in time. I think all of those other processes are sort of outside of setting the police and crime plan. So I think the biggest thing for me is, if you're interested, we could bring an estate strategy discussion to this panel.
Councillor Loudon, maybe hold that thought for maybe a recommendation, because I certainly as chair would welcome that. Okay. Councillor Worth.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to bring up the point where you mentioned about targeting resource and money towards, particularly you said drugs and alcohol now. And really it's understanding for myself, but I think the public as well. There's a net revenue budget mentioned in here, it's 406 million. If there is a fine that results from a motoring offence or from the, finding some of this cash related to drugs or whatever you find it from, and let's say that fine is £100, how much of that 100 do you get to spend on making the improvements for the benefit of our residents?
So one of the things around road safety is that if you get the fine and you don't take up a speed awareness course, all of that fine goes to the Treasury, to the government. And actually we've just did a launch of our road safety lobby document this week up in Westminster, where we're asking for that money to be returned as part of road safety back to force areas. So the money from the fine goes straight to the government. The money for the speed awareness course comes back to us, but not quite all of it, because there's a national infrastructure around speed awareness courses that is top sliced, but most of that comes back to us, and we can then use that to reinvest into road safety and to run the contract for actually delivering the speed awareness courses. So that we've got that opportunity on road safety, and if people just stopped speeding and wore their seatbelt and didn't use a mobile phone, we'd have no money. So, the bit for us is the aim is to actually get to that point. So I want the same sort of model around how we deal with the money that we get off of people who have got drugs. So we can keep some of the cash seized. Some of it goes to the Home Office, some of it comes back to policing, but it's not, it's on like a, retrospective. You don't get it in the year, you get it the next year, so you don't know quite what you're getting. But I think there's an opportunity to be able to hurt drug dealers a lot more with more financial penalties, taking and seizing their assets, and how we try and keep as much as that locally to invest back into how we tackle in drugs in Devon and Cornwall.
I'll just come back and ask though, in the report, and in some ways I'm looking for the figures, and they're not there at the moment. So is it that you can't predict what it's going to be, or at the moment of the 406 million, we don't know what that share is? Because I think that's something that could be shown as a benefit to our public, that we're using it locally to improve our situation?
Again, it's outside of the Police and Crime Plan production process, but again, we have the Proceeds of Crime Act money, I get Property Fund Act money, we get money seized, for, so there is a range of revenue streams that come back to the force via government for things that they've done to tackle and enforce. So what we can do is, what I said, this is my ambition. I don't know if it's achievable. No other area has done it yet. So again, I'd like to build on the success of Vision Zero to get the same type of approach for drugs and alcohol.
Councillor Hackett.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of questions for the Commissioner. I'm pleased to see you're going to prioritise wildlife officers. Rural crime is terribly destructive in my area. Now, my understanding, the number of officers for the whole of Devon and Cornwall was originally 2 and went down to 1. Could you tell me what your aspirations are in numbers to be a realistic force to deal with this?
Chair, that's an operational question for the Chief Constable. I'm afraid I can't answer that one at this point.
I did ask for an opinion there as to what your aspirations were, but also I think it shows the benefit of having the Chief Constable along to these meetings so we can talk about the operational matters, and I think it's a very valid point for you to take forward, Chair.
Okay.
But your aspirations, please, for the number of officers you would like.
Councillor Hackett. The panel was made up that we scrutinise our commissioner, not the actual chief officer himself. Okay, so hence why he's not brought to the meeting. We can't summon him to the meeting. I know sometimes the commissioner has felt that he could come along when there has been something on the agenda that would relate to his service. So I think it would be very unfair for even to ask the commissioner to surmise or her thoughts at this panel. Okay, so I'm going to overrule that question, please.
Okay, right.
Councillor Hackett, I do have quite a list. So
yes, I shall be brief.
Councillor Hackett, as you've asked one question, can I ask that you go to the bottom of my list and allow other members
Certainly.
to speak first, and then I'm more than happy to bring you back.
Not a problem.
So you please apologise the way I'm going to say this, so I do hope I'm going to say it correct. Please.
Gordon,
thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Czapieski, Mid Devon. Could I ask if the office has a risk register for the plan? There are references to risks, obviously, within the force, but with regard to the plan, and does that feed in, or will that feed into the measures so that you'll be able to focus on the things that you think are at greater risk? And again, asking for an opinion, what would you deem to be the greatest risk? What gives you most concern about the plan that you've got? Not from a sleepless night point of view, but from the point of view of where you feel you need the greatest support and effort from the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. There's a couple of elements there, just in terms of until this plan is produced and finalised, the only issue I have is to check that the Chief Constable is having regard to the plan. Now, obviously, I'd like everybody to have regard to the plan, and we work with local authorities to have some form of regard to the plan. But it will be on the back of that where we'll identify a clear action plan with the Chief Constable and partners around what needs to be in there. And then that will be highlighted through whether or not we're going to deliver on those actions. So there's an element of, this is setting out, if you like, the priority areas, and what the next step is what is the actual granularity of what we're going to be doing in those. That will be coming next, and of course the risk will be identified in that action plan, that there's not enough resources for something, or I need to find a different way to do something. That will be identified as we go, but this is setting out the ambition of the areas that I'd like better focus on in terms of that.
I was really focusing on the slide that's showing the data collection point of view, that the risk register would be the start point, not the end point, I would have thought. Thank you.
If you want to. So Felicity will just highlight. She was the granular data person for this.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. As the Commissioner has alluded to, the police force has a risk register. This is called the Force Risk Register and the Force Management Statement. And what that uses is an index to assess the threat, risk and harm of different crime types. That information was all used. The Commissioner, when describing our risk register, we use that data of the police force rather than holding a risk register. And when this plan is finalised, we will then assess the risk of the plan being delivered as opposed to the threat and the risk of the actual crime type, which is force data. So it exists, it's all there, it's just slightly different ways of describing different types of risk registers that we're going to use.
Chairman, I'll just add though, because you did say which area needs the most support or needs the most energy. I think fundamentally it's the performance of the force itself, getting the basics right. That you saw at the last meeting panel, the Chief Constable presented around the improvement in public contact and some of those things. We need to get the police force much more efficient and effective than it is at the moment. And I think that's why it's got a clear focus in here, that's something I need to make sure I'm looking at, not just doing a lot of the partnership landscape. And I've spent a lot of the 8 years I've been here working with partners to deliver with communities to fight crime, and there needs to be a stronger, more robust focus around police performance for itself.
Just on that, certainly speaking to my local police force, the submission of reports, tickets, reporting crimes is the problem that they tell me. I know it's operational, but it's relevant. Encouraging people to submit reports that they can act on when those people might be at fear of reprisal in case they do. I know it's a very complex area, but the submission of more information. Anyway, thank you.
Just to add, Chair, this is why I fund and support Crime Stoppers, which is completely anonymous to actually report any crime you wanted to, but I've used it specifically to promote around drug dealing in communities. So Crime Stoppers is independent of the police and is a completely anonymous system, both online and on the phone.
Okay, Councillor Rainsford.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the public survey that was undertaken, the responses to what other crime and policing issue do you think should be considered? Road safety is still there, and there is some drilling down into it, and you talk about e-scooters, cycling on pavements and so on as being an issue. Certainly from my perspective as a new councillor in Plymouth, but electric bikes are a huge issue. Not only are they involved in sort of snatching of phones and all those sorts of things, they are hazardous, causing accidents. Difficult to police, very difficult to police. I wondered whether or not, as a police commissioner and with other police commissioners, you're talking to government pressing for action in this particular area in relation to the delivery bikes for starters. You know, should they be insured? Should they wear high vis? And those sorts of elements to try and reduce the number of incidents that happen.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, and I want to just reassure you as well that I will still be, if the partnership allows me, at Vision Zero, chairing Vision Zero Road Safety Partnership. I will still be putting a lot of effort and commitment into that, but what I'm not doing is putting extra investment in or making the police do something dramatically different. So just to reassure you why it's not a priority, it is still business. It is business as usual now, and I'm comfortable with that. In terms of e-scooters, bane of our lives in Devon and Cornwall, because we only had, I think, one trial area, and it's been horrendous. Councillor Phil Byack in Exeter talks to me regularly about the city centre there. I think one of the challenges we've got, and when we took our lobby document to government this week. Gosh, it was this week, I've been in London. This week, one of the asks is to actually regulate or legislate for e-scooters and e-bikes. So it's been a real challenge. And I think one of the biggest issues that people don't understand, because there was a death following a police response on somebody who was on an e-scooter. Police must not pursue people who are on them because it's too risky in terms of health and safety. So while it's easy to say, go and catch them, they can't really, and because they don't have a registration plate and they don't know where they live, unless they're regularly going down the same route where they might in some way be able to find out who they are. It's a real challenge. So we do need the government, and I think they will. I think the government would be really keen to do something around this, because they've already immediately, upon taking office, signed off the moving traffic regulations for the county that was submitted, and the government before took 2 years and hadn't done it. So there's clearly a focus, I think, going to be on road safety in this one. So that we're lobbying. We've gone as Vision Zero. We've got a document we've sent into ministers and MPs, and I will actually make sure we share that with members, that what we've sent as well. And it might be worth me talking about that at a future meeting as well.
Thank you, that's very helpful, because it is a difficult area.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to express that I'm really pleased to see the 4 pillars, and that you're confirming that this isn't all there is. This is where you're looking for improvement. So it's really good to see the 4 pillars that you're focusing on, and that's cross-referenced, as it were, by where that focus will occur and in what format. The start of it says in our towns and city centres. So I'm pleased to hear that you're specifically aware of some of the issues we have in Exeter city centre, but obviously cities as such are more complex environments than elsewhere. So it's not, we don't have issues just in the city centre, because there's a wider urban setting. There are also centres where crime can occur or antisocial behaviour can occur elsewhere. So just kind of highlighting that one. But with regard to antisocial behaviour, which is priority 1, I'm just wondering, in the presentation you make reference to repeat offenders, and the Home Secretary is putting through proposals in the Crime and Policing Bill around respect orders. So I just wonder if you could explore how useful you feel those would be. And just, I know we're looking at one question, but I'll just sneak a little one in if that's all right. Just to welcome your focus as well on women and girls feeling safer in our cities. I appreciate the support that you've given to the Safe Space initiative in Exeter. I'm just wondering if you will be continuing in your support of that initiative, and perhaps look at how it can be employed elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I suppose, firstly, I welcome any tool that will help us tackle antisocial behaviour. I think one of the things that we've identified just in doing some of the work we've been doing locally, particularly with Exeter, Torbay and Plymouth, not to say that that's the only focus I have, but that's where a lot of our high challenges are faced. We've recognised that to try and implement some of these things, the tools that are available, and it possibly will be the same even with respect orders, is the legal support that's required from either local authorities or the police to advise the police officers to get it right and make it go through the system as it needs to, so it can be escalated to a higher level if it's failing at first attempt. So things like community protection warnings and community protection notices and the escalation procedure, it needs legal support. So I think I welcome it. We have funded extra legal support, my office, for Exeter and Torbay in particular, and I think they've been helping Plymouth a little bit as well at this point, to help our officers with the existing tools. But I'd be just interested to see what does this have, because we started with ASBOs, it went to criminal behaviour, or, we're going to have something else. They're all much of the same thing. They're all a bureaucratic process that has to be followed, and if you don't follow it properly, it fails at court. So ultimately, it's what do we do to actually make them get through first time, to be able to help those individuals that clearly do not understand boundaries in a public space. So welcome any tool that comes from government. And Exeter, of course, one of my favourite cities, as I say to the chairman who's Plymouth, one of my favourite cities on patch, a joy to work with. And I have to say, only recently, a couple of months ago, we had a business expo, business crime expo. And because you've got such a functioning business improvement district, your city council team focused on community safety, the businesses are organised, absolutely joyful to work with them to actually try and focus on it. So I think you probably do need to ensure the voice of those outside of that city centre are heard better. So if there is any way that we would help to have that communication about some of those challenges, I'd more than happy to hear them.
Councillor Hackett.
Thank you again, Chair. I'd like to turn to the issues of shoplifting, street marshals and PCSOs. I was horrified to see that the crime figures are going the wrong way at the local CSP meeting I attended recently, and it's causing a lot of concern with public confidence. Now, I've advocated street marshals and PCSOs at a local level to get local intelligence, and I think that would pick up and identify the issue that was raised before with e-bikes. Local knowledge is key. The PCSOs were telling me that. Could we make sure that we increase the numbers of those PCSOs? And also, there is this figure that I've seen on television that shoplifters who shoplift under £200 do not get prosecuted per offence. That has got to be looked at and challenging, because, quite frankly, if people know they're below a threshold, they're going to go out and do it if they're that way inclined. So we really do need to address this. I was very disappointed you didn't speak to me after the last meeting. I would welcome a conversation with you after this meeting, but more importantly, the shopkeepers of Bideford and the local councillors would like to meet with you. Would you take them up on this invitation? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. The one thing I will say is this government is keen to invest in policing. Again, I haven't seen the details yet, but PCSOs are on that list for increasing, so we'll await to see what the plans for those are. So obviously the budget will be announced shortly, the council tax threshold will be announced shortly, and there'll be opportunities for us to consider what that means to us. As you may be aware, that I have funded the street marshals in your area, and at the moment I've funded them in quite a few areas to assist councils to deliver on their duties around antisocial behaviour, and I think it's been quite successful. I've had really positive feedback, but as you saw at the last meeting with the hotspot policing, that's also offered really positive feedback from the public about visibility of policing. Just in terms of the £200, that is actually a myth. I think it's just been badgered around. I think the reality is shopkeepers don't report individual small thefts, and the second thing is, even if they do, policing resources wouldn't enable every single theft to be dealt with, and that's the reality. But there is no actual threshold. That has just been banded around and become a narrative that everyone believes to be true. And they certainly would be interested in someone who repeatedly thieved something that was minor, who but repeatedly did it. So and there is a particular focus in my plan, which I haven't stated, is I do want to be looking at repeat offenders, repeat victims, and repeat locations. It is a bit of a no-brainer. We kind of know who they are in terms of the offenders most of the time. We certainly know who the victims are if they come forward, and we certainly know where it's happening. So there is a real importance to get the best resources focused on those repeat offenders, repeat locations, and repeat victims. And if you'd like to book a meeting with my office, I'm more than happy to have a discussion outside of this meeting. But I would like it to be formal. Thank you.
Certainly, we'll do a formal invitation for you to come up to Torridge. But can I just make clear, are you going to fund street marshals ongoing now you're seeing they're so successful? Because my understanding it was just a one-year appointment.
We got £1 million from the last government to tackle antisocial behaviour. I'm awaiting to see what we get from this government, but I will be bringing the budget before you in February, I think very early February or end of January even, it might be. It's very early side. So you will get to see what some of the proposals are in that budget through the budget process and be able to comment.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Loudon?
I just wanted to pick up on the point that Councillor Hackett made about the £200 rule, inverted commas. My understanding is that it was in the Something in Crime Act 2014, and it also, if you shoplift more than £200, you get a higher sentence than if it's less than that. So I think the two things do come into play. But I believe this government is looking at that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Loudon. And Commissioner, I would probably say that's probably a legal matter, not a policing matter. Councillor Tyman?
Thank you. If I start by looking at the survey information you did, I think it's disappointing there's a very, very low response from young people. It's not surprising. I think it's something we typically see in almost any survey we do within the local authorities. But I am concerned to make sure that you are taking into account very much the wishes of young people when you look at setting your priorities. Because I think we all see in our local communities, and certainly the work I've done to do with housing, how much young people leave Devon and Cornwall. And I think that we need your help. And I know you do a lot of work with schools, and that's fine, but I do wonder whether we do enough work with people during their 20s and 30s, which is the point in which they leave, to make them feel safe. Some initiatives in here to do with the making girls and women will help towards that. That's great. But I do think there's something about young people having a bad reputation with older people, which doesn't help encourage them to stay in the community. And I think we really need to put more emphasis on actually working to help remove that stigma that young people have within the community. And I think that some of the work I've seen in Torquay in particular, is very much focused and is very much working in that direction. I'm very keen to see that it continues and doesn't just plateau, and actually we persevere more and making the whole place feel more attractive for our young folk. Do you feel that your planning looking forward is actually taking into account that as a specialist need?
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a few things to say about our fantastic, can I say, young people in Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. Firstly, I can tell you, especially just even when I was in Torquay on my van, my engagement van, talking to the public, young people came up and spoke to me, and they said, "Oh, we don't normally come to this area because it's frightening and unsafe." So I get very specific geographic responses. I've also been out speaking to students at colleges at this term of office. I've made it my real focus, as panel members who've been here for quite a while will know that we always have had a challenge trying to engage young people in some of our efforts. So I've made a really big effort of trying to reach out and speak with, so they understand why they need to tell police and crime commissioners information about where they live. I can promise you they're worried about exactly the same things we are. They're worried about not feeling safe on the street when they're out and about. They're worried about drugs and alcohol in their community, and vapes, if you want to add it into that. They're worried about violence and that they don't report it when it happens to them, even though we've got an increase in young victims of crime. And they're worried about theft. I've got people who are at college telling me they're worried about the jacket that they wear because it's a valuable jacket. They like to wear things much more expensive than I do, and they tend to be really concerned about theft. So I don't think the priorities don't reflect what young people want. I think our challenge is how do we engage young people in helping us to deliver on those. And I'm particularly, we've got a specific young people survey that's out at the moment. We've got 300 responses to that so far. And also, in particular, the serious violence element, our learning from the serious violence programme that we did, we identified that 0 to 25-year-olds is where we need to focus to support them better and to help them not be victims of crime or perpetrate crime. So I think you'll see some of the delivery on the plan you'll see some of the focus will be on young people. And in particular, obviously I'm focused at the other end, really, a lot of the end, the crisis end with young people. And as I chair the Criminal Justice Board locally for Devon and Cornwall, we had our planning day recently, and we have set youth justice and putting children first as the priority for the courts, the probation service, the youth offending service, the Crown prosecution service and the police to enable us to support young people better. And I'm really proud to say that the Crown Prosecution Service is going to lead on that on our behalf on the Criminal Justice Board. So young people is in our mind a lot of the time. What we want to do is support them. And you actually have some young people in the audience today who are public service courses just coming to understand about police and crime commissioners and democracy and what that means for people. So I think we're getting a lot better than we have in the past about how we engage with young people, but I think you'll find in your local authorities you have very similar challenges as well. So again, if there's things you want to raise with me around specific geographic issues, do so.
Okay, Caroline.
Thank you, and nice to meet you. It's my first panel today. So I'm the independent member for Cornwall. Just a bit of a background, so I currently work part-time with children and young people. So I'm going to pick up from where you started that conversation, because actually that's a real passion of mine. Just a couple of things, really. Obviously, the plan mentions children and young people. It doesn't talk about how these things are going to happen in particular. So I'd be interested to get your views on the sorts of plans that you've got for engaging. I know you said it's hard to engage children and young people, but there's lots of things that go on. So, for example, in Cornwall, we have an annual Speak Up survey for children and young people. It goes out to all children and young people, and anybody can ask a question. So, that could be used as a way of engaging with young people around crime and safety, for example. But I want to go back to the point you made about some of the feedback you've had around your plan, about it being very crime-focused. I understand why, because you're the Police and Crime Commissioner. However, I understand where that's coming from, because actually, if we don't start tackling the problems at the point of where things are going wrong, we're always going to have increases in crime rates, aren't we? So, I would like to have your thoughts around how some of your officers can work in prevention, because that's a really big focus for us nationally. And if we go back to the point that was made around that the Home Office this morning releasing their antisocial behaviour project, which is now going to be called, I did write it down, Respect Orders. The focus is very much on adults rather than children. So I'm glad to see that, because I'm assuming the next bit that will come along will be the early intervention and prevention agenda for children. So I know it's only been published today, but it would be nice to see something like that in the plan, just to kind of look at that focus. And when we talk about serious violence, I will stop in a moment. Sorry, it's about children and young people. It's all one question. And when we talk about reducing violence for women and girls, I didn't see enough in the plan. I know you've got these kind of the kind of safety buses that go around. I understand all of that, but actually in Cornwall in particular, it's a really large rural area, and we do have quite high instances of violence against women and girls. And I'm not sure it's we get the benefit of some of the stuff that happens in the other big cities, is what I'm saying, really. So from a Cornwall perspective, I'd like to know, have an understanding from you of how you think you're going to start tackling some of those issues in Cornwall.
Thank you, Chair. Delighted we have an independent panel member who's got a background in young people. That's really exciting, actually. And you'll be delighted to know that I met Gabby, who's the chair of the Youth Council for Cornwall, only last week at Cornwall Leadership Board. They presented their priorities from a young person's perspective, and actually crime and safety only came up one of the top 3 priorities in Camborne and Redruth. And interestingly, after Torbay, Camborne and Redruth is my one that I'm thinking needs some real focus. So I've just thought that was really quite interesting. So I'm going to be presenting their views into policing so that it's formalised. So just so you know, that voice from Cornwall will be heard loud and clear within Devon and Cornwall Police. I think the other element for me around prevention is it's really difficult to be, we all know we need to do more in prevention, all of us, in all of our, whatever we represent. But the reality is the money that I receive from both the government and from the taxpayer is for policing. And I've had my monitoring officer, chief exec, tell me, no, we can't fund that, Alison. That's one step far too removed from policing to be able to justify it. So the best I can do is influence the partners who are in the space of being able to do more prevention, of directing and supporting them with reporting and recommendations of how we can help them. And the serious violence duty, I think, will enable us to have a bit stronger relationship around that. So yes, prevention is key, but we do know it starts in the womb. We do know it starts from birth. It's not something that happens to you at 8. It often happens from a very young age. And these are spaces that are very difficult for me to be looking at funding. And we did consider at one point under the serious violence programme to see where the best interventions with young people would be to stop violence occurring. And it is at the youth age of like 5. So it's often at birth, it's usually about 5, and then it was about 8, and then it was about 12. Those are the ages you can do the best intervention with them when you've identified an issue. But I can't really fund some of that. So I think there's a challenge for how we use all of our collective resources to focus on some of the prevention that's required. I think our biggest challenge is our ambition in our communities to thrive. And I know many local authorities sat around here are trying to help their communities thrive with looking at their economic development, looking at their wage economy, how can they grow it, how can the business sector have a role. So I do rely a lot on our partners to deliver a safe place really for young people. And the respect orders, you know, it's good that it's come out for adults, because I walk around my area, the main feedback I get is around adult antisocial behaviour. It's not young people. There's a few and far between of those, but it is adult. But fundamentally, we have got an issue, in my view, and I don't know if this government will do anything different, is that if you commit a crime as a young person, it's highly unlikely you'll ever be taken through the criminal justice system, because the academic research shows the sooner you put them in that system, the more likely they will continue to be in that system. But what that's led to is not really giving justice to victims where young people have committed quite serious offences. And I've been with a family whose son was stabbed and they didn't get a custodial from the person who was under 18 who stabbed them. And, you know, I think we've got to really get the right people through the system who we need to protect our communities. So I think there's been a bit too much not dealing with them properly through the system, if I'm frank. But that's why I think a focus on youth justice will help us through the Criminal Justice Board to get the right people who should be away to protect our communities, and those that need the support and help to not re-offend get the right support. And I can help fund some of those things.
Do you mind if I respond to that? So thanks for that, that's really helpful. I think the other bit which I didn't say, which I probably should have said, is the violence stuff for me is also around sexual violence, so not just physical violence, but sexual violence against women and young girls in particular. And the other worry that children and young people certainly talk to us about in Cornwall is around cyberbullying and that kind of cyber crime, I guess. And I was just wondering what your view on that was as well, and I will be quiet now.
If I'm really frank, this is why I want radical ideas for domestic and sexual abuse, because what we've been doing so far ain't working. There's nothing like having a commissioner who's got experience of it to be annoyed about it, who wants to do something completely different. So I think we do need to have radical ideas, and if you've got any that come from your young people, what are those disruption tactics we could use, and what could we do that's really fierce, because it ain't going to stop and it is growing. And I could say people are just reporting more, but the reality is it's rife and it's not good enough, and we can't seem to stem the flow. So we've got some real challenges around tackling that. So I think that is a big one for me. And what you will tend to find largely, the sexual violence that we see here is happening either in intimate relationships, or it's very rare we get stranger violence on women. We've had some awful instances of murders, don't get me wrong, but it's people who you know, and we have to break that cycle of what is going on there. And it's particularly our young people are being largely affected by it who don't report at all. There is actually a really radical idea that is being launched in Bristol at the moment. I won't speak about it because my office tells me there's no due diligence on it, so we can't support it at this point, but I really support it, and it is a disruptive tactic for students to use. And the organisation's called Enough, and they're just launching in the next few weeks, so it's quite exciting, but at the moment we haven't done the due diligence for me to be able to proactively support it, but we need disruptors in that space, and I'm looking for those ideas, please.
Thank you both. Councillor Tilbury?
Thanks, Chair. Thank the Commissioner for a draft, detailed plan. There's a lot there for us all to take in. I'm glad to see that one of your priorities is with regards to drugs in particular. You mentioned coastal resorts. I'm from the Bude area, and we've got a big problem with drugs, especially within the younger community, where drug dealers are coming into Bude and targeting younger members. I was just wondering if you could give us some sort of practical demonstration of how you're going to go forward with that, and in particular work with the Bude and Stratton Town Council, who are keen to work with you, if that's possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. As you may know, we've been running Op Scorpion now for, I think we've done 8 phases of it over the last 9 phases of it over the last 2.5 years. And it hasn't just been about going in and arresting street-level drug dealers, which has been the main focus. It's also been about county lines, which is the people coming in from outside, selling to our communities and exploiting our young people. But what I'd really like and what I really need to really help is to get people to report to Crime Stoppers where they see it, when they see it, what they see. I need that anonymous reporting to come in, because that intelligence is what is making the focus of our Operation Scorpion each phase. So if we get a lot of intel from an area about something, they can go and have a good look at it. They might kick some doors in. They might do some arrests. They also might safeguard a number of people. The number of people we safeguarded from either cuckooing, where they go in and take over their flat, or we've supported young people and done interventions to stop them being involved in the drugs trade, has also been what we've been doing through Operation Scorpion. So I really want that intel into policing. It comes into Crime Stoppers, and they will give actionable intelligence over to the police, and it's completely anonymous and separate. And we need that intel to come in, because everyone's been seeing it for too long and accepting it for too long in our communities. So that's what I really need to be able to help Bude.
Okay, so I'm going... Oh, Barry, sorry. I was going to say I was the final speaker, but I'm not. Barry, please.
Hi. So what you've dealt with at the moment in this plan mostly is like the front-facing. So you do mention improving your police service, and that is part of your role, is to give an effective and efficient police service. So I thought there should be some of the back office functions, back office issues, shall I say, in this report as well, because they need to be addressed. So we're familiar with what the Peel report has said in some areas. So when you're going to investigations, some of the things they've mentioned: no investigation plan, not enough skilled investigators, not achieving acceptable outcomes for victims. It's all in the report. And so the investigation process isn't being effectively managed. And all that stuff that happens in the background affects how effective you are in prosecuting some of these offences that go through. So it's not unreasonable that there's something in the report with some sort of timeframes, because HMIC, the Peel report has given you recommendations like to get things done in either 3 months or 6 months. It gives you a time frame. So it's worth, I think it's important to have it in this report, because it's affecting all parts of what you do. So I know you've had this project Synergy been going on, and that's coming to full implementation. It says 24-25, so that's around now. And that's redesigning the way the investigations work in hubs, as far as I understand. And that'll allow less experienced investigators to work with more experienced investigators, I hope. But there's still an imbalance between, it appears there's still an imbalance between inexperienced investigators. So it's what I've read in the report, it's what's been intimated to me as well from a former detective. So that is where that is an area where investigations don't flow properly, stuff gets put down, there's no investigation plan, somebody picks it up again, and all these inefficiencies that are creating extra work, are being covered over by a workforce that then has to put more time in with overtime to cover up these inefficiencies. So I would like to see some part of that back office that's going on about the police force and how it works in the report, because it's one, it's part of your role, and two, it affects what happens at the front end as well. It's probably less visible to people, but if you're a victim of crime and you're one of those people that cases doesn't go through, it gets so far down the line and it doesn't go through, that's, as far as they're concerned, that's catastrophic. And you just lose that person who is a law-abiding citizen. You lose their support. So those are there are other areas as well. So the recording of the crime data integrity, which I think, have you been looking at? I'm not sure what that reference on page 51, was it page 51 was? I asked for a copy of it, and it says it's been published, but it hasn't been published. Is that right? Is that right? So there's other areas, so the crime, data integrity, and I'm not sure if that's related to this niche system. Is it called niche that you've had? And there's been lots of problems with reporting that the implementation didn't work properly. So there's lots of information not being recorded properly. So some of the data you're working on, if it's coming from them, is not, I don't know how bona fide it is. And I do feel as though if you're trying to manage the performance of that back room, you're sort of like doing a bit blind if you haven't got the data to judge what's been going on. So do you think there should be more back office operations and improving that back office, the police force effectively, in this plan? To hold the chief constable to account, because it's better that it's up front there, so he can see it and you can see it, and you can give him support in the open, as opposed to it just hoping it all gets done.
Thank you, Chairman. As a new panel member, it might be helpful for you to come and have an induction in the force as well, for you to come and meet and see some of these systems and people that you talk about. There's a few things there. If you go to Annex C in the plan, you'll see that I am going to be monitoring the crime data integrity in terms of what there is for CDI compliance, and also the increased percentage of positive outcomes. What that actually means in plain English is those that have got over the line and had a result, whether that's an out-of-court disposal, a conviction at court, a protection order. So the outcomes shows you whether the crime has been processed. So that's what I'm looking for, the high-level result of them improving their back office. But I do just want to give some praise to the police, because this isn't just a Devon and Cornwall issue around investigation. This is a national issue. We've had conversations before about a national shortage of detectives, because it's not the role that everyone wants to do anymore, because it is really hard. It's quite a bureaucratic role. It's quite an administrative role, some of what you have to do as a detective. And since the introduction in the last few years of redaction, where you have to make sure that you've removed people's faces and names and things, of all the stuff you have to do before you send it for a charging decision, and also disclosure of making sure that you've listed and are transparent about every bit of information that you have gathered as part of the case, even though 90% of it may be irrelevant to actually getting to the point of the evidence for the charge. All this added bureaucracy that's come in, and I know the government is really keen. The policing minister, the Home Secretary actually only said this week that they're really looking at how we can help forces with redaction. This removing all this information for data protection purposes that is happening and needs to happen there is some technological solutions to it, which the government may assist us with, because it is a largely bureaucratic process to be able to get somebody's crime to a conviction. And I will say, while we have got really challenging back office things, some of the performance measures that you'll see at panel that I've put before you are about the results of those back office functions. So, as I said, under investigations, those top level ones, are we recording the crime properly and good enough? And by the way, that's a massive bureaucratic process. The book to record a crime is that thick. And if you wanted to get to 100%, I can tell you now, I would not be encouraging the Chief Constable to get to 100%, because the level of resource of administration and officers you'd need to just be recording the crime absolutely spot on is unachievable and unaffordable. But they do safeguard every single person who comes in with a crime. It just may or may not be absolutely perfectly recorded, and often the recorded crime is linked to a secondary crime, not the primary crime that they're dealing with the investigation. It's the secondary crime that was an aside that hasn't been recorded properly. So it's a bureaucratic process that's the biggest headaches for the Chief Constable. But recording the compliance and understanding how much confidence we have in the crime recording is one, and those positive outcomes is a way of trying to show that it's actually been dealt with within the time and has actually been a result. And if you think about the other back office ones which have been inefficient, which has been our call handling, again, the result is what we want to see. So it doesn't matter how it's done, is the result working, and can we afford it? So the result is, are we answering 999s on time? Are we answering 101? Can people report crime easily? So again, all these are the sort of public-facing measures, which are the results of those things being improved in the back office. Now, in terms of, you mentioned Project Synergy, I'm still on the fence about whether that's actually going to deliver an improvement, and been talking with my office about what piece of scrutiny can we do over some of those pieces of work, because the word hub, and I'm sure many of you members in this room, as soon as your off-council talks about let's set up a hub, you know it's like, what improvement is it really going to make? So it's been overused as a word in local government, the word hubbing, as a solution to all our problems, and I'm still on the fence about that one. So there's some work that I'll be doing, holding the chief to account, not necessarily in public, but privately, because I do respect his operational independence. And if you imagine, about 95%, maybe 98% of the decisions the Chief Constable makes has absolutely nothing to do with me. And they are operational independent, and I cannot interfere with them. So I will work with the Chief Constable on how we make those improvements. And again, you may see some of that come through in the budget in February in terms of what I will be looking to invest in. And that will also give you some visibility and sight of where some of those challenges are.
I understand you say it's a national...
Very quickly, Barry, because we're running right really over.
I understand you said it's a national issue, and I can see, I think something's been in the press this week about different areas about, well, let's not one force reinvent the wheel. Everywhere doing this, reinventing their own wheel. So cross-border, you're not in competition with each other. So it's a case of working with others and finding what solution they've found, as well as and using it back here. And this is one of the letters. This is from the letter at the end of September from the HMIC. I would encourage you to ask for and accept, this is to the Chief Constable, ask for and accept all offers of help to support the force's progress in these areas. So will you support or suggest to the Chief Constable to engage with other forces to develop the back office in Devon and Cornwall?
Chairman, that is what they've been doing, and particularly we've had even extra help because Her Majesty's Inspectorate has assisted the force in having extra help than any other force would normally want. So there has been a lot of support available. In fact, our call handling centre was peer reviewed by Humberside Police, who are the best at answering the phones. They've been down and done that. In terms of investigations, there's still some work to be done there. And the redaction problem, like I said, there's a technology solution, but not all forces, same as local government, can implement it all at the same time as each other, because your budgets are in a different position, your workforce is in a different position culturally, and it's not something you can just do like that. So what I will say is the Chief Constable is very good at reaching out to other forces, and His Majesty's Inspectorate has been extremely helpful in supporting the Chief as and when required on the issues that you raise.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Councillor Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, I accept if it's not a priority, then it doesn't mean it's not happening. It just means it's business as usual. Are you happy then, bearing in mind it affects the most vulnerable in our society, are you happy with where we are with business as usual on hate crime? Because I noticed that hate crime, isn't a specific priority.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if you recall when I brought my scrutiny to panel a while back, I am comfortable with the way that we've got a high support satisfaction rate for people who are victims of hate crime. We've got an excellent team in our diverse communities team in the force that support our communities. So again, if there was a step change of something that had happened, massive step change, we've even had a riot, I will call it, in Plymouth that may have been linked to hate, but my gosh, were we proud of the fact that it was very minimal, and compared to other areas, our communities are integrated and support each other. So for me at the moment, I'm comfortable that it's not a priority, but if there was a step change, and I think that would be obvious, I would be bringing investment in an area that I thought needed more.
Okay, I'm going to ask the final, well, not make a comment really, but the final question I'm going to use. So we've talked an awful lot about violence against women and girls, drugs, alcohol. It's really big pieces in your pack. I know we've had a conversation, but I just want to make it a little bit more formal. I'm very proud here in Plymouth we have an absolutely excellent safe bus that goes out in our nighttime economy. Commissioner, I'm hoping that we'll send you an invitation and you will accept to come down and see the safe bus. And I'm going to be very, very cheeky and say I'm hoping that you might find some funding to support it, because I know our police and all our partners work really hard, and it has a knock-on effect, with A&E, we've seen numbers going down where people aren't going, and this could be due to drug use, spiking, right down to a pair of stilettos are now killing you at the end of the night, and we supply a pair of flip-flops. But it's a great asset, and I'm sure it's something that your police force could use more as an information centre. So I will put it in a formal thing, because it's not right for me to ask you here and now. But I certainly welcome you and your team to Plymouth to see it. So can I thank you for your report? I do want to move on now, as we are certainly running over. We're going to go to items. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I have got resolutions and I've got recommendations. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself again here. It's because it is so code. You know what I mean? We are saving. Budgets are hard for everybody, Commissioner, not just yourself, but local authorities as well at the moment, if anyone's freezing in here. I am looking that we might probably have 2 recommendations out of this report. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we've looked at the estates that I think Councillor Loudon's brought up, and possibly have a look about the e-bikes that Councillor Rainsford. So Councillor Loudon, what would you propose regarding the estates for a recommendation, please?
Well, I just wanted to pick up the offer that the Commissioner made to bringing forward to a future panel meeting an outline or a report, a summary, whatever phraseology you would like to use about her approach to the estates, her estate.
That's
if you
lovely.
can make some sense of that, Ross.
Thank you. So, Councillor Rainsford, you've mentioned about e-bikes. Would that be very similar sort of recommendation?
I would assume it would be something along the lines of asking the Commissioner to continue to lobby, press for changes, regulation on electric bikes and scooters.
You've got that?
So through you, Chair, unless there's any more contributions, we're going to add those. We'll add those 2 elements around estates and e-bikes.
And I think the recommendation within the report is for the panel to agree to draft Police and Crime Plan 25 to 29, and we'll include those comments. So over to you, Chair. Yes, please.
Okay, so could I have a show of hands of everyone in agreement? Right. Thank you, that's carried. Right, so moving on to item 6. Members, Commissioner will have had the papers. They will have had time to read it. So I'm going to take this item as read. Do any members of the panel have any comments they would like to make, please?
Chairman, I've just got one thing I need to flag that's incorrect in the report, if that's okay. And you did mention it, Mr. Jones, around the file quality scrutiny that I've done. It won't be published until December. It says in there it is published. It's just got to go back through the Criminal Justice Board before I publish it formally. So it does say in there it's published, and it's not yet until December.
Barry, have you got a question you want to ask?
So earlier in the week, there was a chief constable, there was an assistant chief constable suspended up north by the, because of investigations by the Ombudsman in Northern Ireland. So they're obviously very busy over there in Northern Ireland. And that may well put more delay into whether Chief Constable Kerr returns or not. So, what was I going to say? So, how is that? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong as I go. I think it was back in July you said the best thing Chief Constable Kerr could do is resign for the force. I think it was something. No? No, I thought I was.
Sorry, I've never said that publicly anywhere.
No, there was something back in July, so it was before I was a member, and it was. I thought I'd seen it on the television news.
It's one of the options.
It's one of the options.
One of the options.
Okay. So there's a cost. There's a cost to the not being a chief constable at the moment, and not a financial cost, but a cost in terms of a non-financial cost in terms of what decisions are being made. And you can see that now might be dragged out further if there's Northern Ireland's got other investigations to deal with. And were you aware of that?
Chair, I can probably tell you that the investigation into Mr. Kerr is with the Public Prosecution Service and not with the Ombudsman of Northern Ireland anymore. So it's moved.
Okay, anybody got any more questions? No, so panel's happy to note that report? Yes, full agreement. Okay, moving on to item 7. Again, panel members have had this item, and basically, anyone got any questions on that one? Panel members happy to note that one? Lovely. Moving on to item 8, our tracking decisions. So I'll just go through them again like I normally do. Have you got any questions on any of them? I have one, if anyone's got any questions. No? Okay, so page 7. So going to page 58, Commissioner, item 4, draft police crime plan. Can you explain to me where it's mentioned in the plan regarding the state of the police and crime plan in the summer challenges faces in Devon and Cornwall? It's on page 58.
Well done, panel. It's not mentioned, is it? I've just realised. Thank you. We will. You might want to add that to your recommendation from the previous agenda item.
Can that be noted, Ross, that needs to be done? Okay. So now we're going on to item 9. Everyone's happy. So this is our work plan. Any comments? Ross, do you have any?
Oh, well, through you, Chair, there's a couple of things I will need to pick up from today's session, actually. So we'll get that included and we'll arrange the timing with the Commissioner's office.
Lovely. And that formally ends the meeting. Can I thank everybody in attendance, and especially those who are subbed and our new members, and Commissioner and your team. Thank you very much. I do promise that come January, it will be a lot warmer in this chamber.
Yeah, that's all right. Thank you, Chair. Just to say, the January meeting is the